On the southernmost edge of Salem is the Sandy Coves Convalescent Home. Before the war, this was a nursing home for the elderly or for people who were unable to care for themselves. The exterior is not that interesting. We do find one skeleton in a wheelchair just outside the entrance. Upon entering, we're greeted by a front desk receptionist, Mr. Handy Robot.
Welcome to Sandy Coves Convalescent Home. How may I help you?
This place is still in business?
But of course! Sandy Coves Convalescent Home runs in continuous operation due to the dedication and attentiveness of our robot staff. Was there anything else?
Visiting my grandma.
Oh, how nice for her! Don't forget to sign in, please.
Just browsing.
Please do not disturb our residents. They need their rest.
I'm checking in. My family filled out the paperwork earlier.
Welcome! We'll put you in Gladys's old room. Take the back stair and it's the first door on your left. Have a nice day!
Passing this speech check gives you a key to Gladys's room, which we will explore in a moment. In the lobby, we find an overdue book return terminal. This is handy because we find a number of overdue books here. You can convert them into tokens to reduce carry weight. The inventory selection is not that impressive. We do find some pre-war toys, which may be interesting for settlement decorations, but I would save your book return tokens for the terminal that gives you the magazine. There's also a locked bathroom in the lobby. If you unlock the bathroom, we find a skeleton on the floor clutching some chems. We also find a pretty tidy stash of chems in this bathroom, so it looks like at least some of the elderly residents of this convalescent home were doing drugs in the bathroom. Behind the counter, we find a series of locked safes. You can't unlock these, even by lockpicking. Next to it is a locked closet that you also can't unpick, and inside we see a perk magazine. To open the locked door, hack the terminal on the front desk. Here we learn a little bit more about the residents of the convalescent home. The residents frequently lost their safe keys. Thankfully, they each kept a backup key in their room, and this note tells us exactly where they are. Catherine in 205 kept one by her cat bowls. Edward in 106 behind his typewriter. Ethel in 203 beneath her paintbrush. Margaret in 104 under her fertilizer. Mortimer in 101 in his favorite boat model. And Randall in 201 under the mounted deer head. There's also a security alert. We learned that Gladys is an escapee. She has left the convalescent home at least 3 different times, and I suppose from this we can take it that she's an ex-military member. The attendee believes that she's hiding explosives in her room. We also learn that the bus stop outside the convalescent home is fake. Buses don't actually go there. They put the bus stop outside to confuse the elderly residents of this home in case they escaped. The idea was that they would go to the bus stop to wait for a bus, but a bus would never come, allowing the convalescent home to easily recollect them. Indeed, if you go out to the bus stop, we do find a cane laying on the bench. And around back, I found a skeleton oddly placed in the ground, which I'm assuming was some sort of glitch. If you knock it, it lies back down. So it looks like there was an elderly person, possibly Gladys, waiting at this fake bus stop when the bombs dropped. Also from here, you can unlock the locked door. Inside, we find Massachusetts Surgical Journal issue number 5, Happy Sedation Special, which permanently causes you to inflict plus 2% limb damage against enemies. It's sad that they use language like escaped when referring to the residents here. It's clear that they were not here of their own free will, that they were kept here against their will. Escaping the convalescent home must have been a big problem for them to go to all the trouble to place a fake bus stop just outside. Heading through the doorway behind the counter leads us to the kitchen. On the kitchen counter, we see a bunch of dead fish being cut up with a machete. I'm assuming that this was before the war, and if this is any indication as to how the residents were fed or treated, I am very scared for them. That looks disgusting. Heading through the connected door, we find the cafeteria, or dining area. Sunlight bathes the skeletons of a few former residents coming in through the windows. Here we find a game of chess going on with bottle caps. Interesting that they would use bottle caps before the war to play a game of chess. And also interesting that this skeleton has his skull detached already and placed on the board almost almost as if it was a game piece. You would think that everyone here would have died suddenly after the bombs dropped from the radiation, but these skeletons are still seated and the skull gingerly placed on the table. On the floor we find a Vault-Tec lunchbox, which we can use to make bottle cap mines. Heading through the door we find a hallway that connects to the rooms. This nearest room is room 106, the home of Edward. Edward was a writer, and the note says that his key is behind his typewriter, which is exactly where we find it. There's a wheelchair in front of his writing desk, so the man was crippled, and on the nearby dresser we find an overdue book. There is also an overdue book lying in the hand of Edward himself. His skeleton lies in his bed, telling us that he was reading a book when he died. Inside his safe, we find a couple of blood packs and some Med-X. I have a feeling that due to the extreme age of many of the residents here, that most of the treasures we will find are going to be chems and medicine. The room next to his is crumbled, with a ramp being formed from the floor leading down into it, but we'll explore the top floor later. The next room over is room 104, which must be Margaret's room. She is a plant lover. We find pots of plants all over and a big stack of fertilizer, underneath which we find Margaret's key, just like the terminal said we would. Margaret herself lies on her bed, bathed in light from the window with a fern to shade her eyes. In death, she is surrounded by plants just as she was in life, which is probably the way she wanted to go. Her safe has 2 Mentats, 2 Radaway, and 2 Stimpaks. The final residential room on this floor is Mortimer's room, room 101. We find a number of model ships inside his room. The note in the terminal said that the key was in his favorite model ship, but we actually find it lying on top of a rather unimpressive rowboat. There are a lot of model ships in this room. Many of them, in fact all of them, are more interesting than this rowboat, so I'm surprised that he would have described the rowboat as his favorite. Mortimer lies on his bed. There is an oar on a shelf above him, a captain's hat on a nightstand beside him, and in his bathtub we see his sad story. We find 3 fish and a fishing pole. The man must have been senile or something. He missed the sea so much that he filled up his bathtub and dropped fish in it to pretend like he was fishing at sea. In his safe we find 2 Rad-X and 2 Radaway. Going back down the hallway, we can wind up the stairs to floor number 2. The first door on the left is Gladys's room. This is the room that you were given. I suppose the handy robot gave it to you because Gladys had actually succeeded on escaping. Inside, we find an American flag and signs of a military career. There's a beret on a shelf, a helmet on a dresser complete with a trifold American flag and a Bowie knife, her army fatigues on an ironing board being ironed, and a chest. Inside, we find mines and grenades, just like the note said we would. There's also a stash of hand grenades right next to her clean and unoccupied bed. Her skeleton is not in this room, so she must have escaped before the bombs dropped. I wonder if her skeleton is the one behind the bus stop, or perhaps she was actually wheelchair bound, and her skeleton was in the wheelchair that we found outside. Heading out and going through the door on the right, we find a balcony overlooking the dining area and a wandering cat. We learn why there's a wandering cat when we enter the next room, which must have belonged to Catherine. Inside the bathroom, we find a cat painting on the wall. The floor is caved in, so be careful as you walk, and just as the terminal said, we find her key lying under one of 3 cat bowls against the wall next to a cat stencil on the wall and another cat painting above. Her body is shoved between the wall and her mattress. The cat must be the descendant of the cats that belonged to Catherine. She had at least 3 cat bowls, which means she had at least 3 cats, and maybe after everyone died, the cats somehow survived and continued to breed and breed and breed over the years until there are a few cats left inside. Of course, they would be severely inbred by that time. Catherine's safe has 2 Psycho and 2 Stimpaks. Her room connects to the room next to it through a broken wall. There's not much loot in this room, and we don't find a skeleton or a key, so I'm not sure who it belonged to. Coming out and turning left, we find a broken elevator. You can open the hatch, but there's nothing interesting in here. And then going down the second hallway, the first room we find must have been Ethel's room. room, room 203. This room is covered with paintings all over the walls. The note on the terminal said that her key was hiding beneath her paintbrush, and indeed we find a paintbrush lying on a surgical tray, and if you loot the paintbrush, underneath is the key. Ethel's body lies on the ground shoved into the corner, and she's clutching one of her paintings. Ethel's safe has 2 Med-X and 2 Rad-X inside. Connected to Ethel's room is the final residential room, room 201, which was Randall's room. Randall must have been a hunter. We find a lot of stuffed and mounted heads all over the walls. His body lies on his bed, and beneath his pillow is the final key, which is directly underneath a mounted deer head, as the terminal says. But it's actually a mounted radstag head. It's a 2-headed deer. And the other mounted animals are also odd. We find mirelurk claws and even a mole rat head, which of course breaks continuity because these animals did not evolve until after the bombs dropped, so how could they possibly be here? Randall's safe has 2 Jet and 2 Med-X in it. Heading out and into the next room, we find a recreation room with a body crushed underneath a bookcase. There are chessboards and other pieces of entertainment lying about. In the far left-hand corner, we find the corpse of someone sitting in a wheelchair looking out the window. Sometimes I forget to turn off my torch to admire these interior cells the way Bethesda designed them to be lit. The light coming in through the windows adds this creepy, cool look to the place, which is just really depressing, honestly. Imagine spending the rest of your life in a place like this. I can hardly bear to think about how horrible that would be. I'm reminded of a quote from Kim Edwards. She's the author of the book, The Memory Keeper's Daughter. She said, "My first job was in a nursing home, a terrible place in retrospect. It was an old house, and the residents were so lonely. People rarely visited them. I only stayed there a couple of months, but it made a strong impression on me." I know that as parents age, it often becomes financially burdensome to take care of them. They can't take care of themselves, and many people, especially from my generation, just don't have the means to take care of their parents, and so they resolve to put them in retirement homes. But it didn't used to be that way. It used to be where it was seen as shameful to put away your parent, that the morally responsible thing to do would be to care for the elderly. The elderly were admired, they were looked up to. They were seen as an important resource, a resource that gave insight into the past, stories that could help mold and shape young people as they grew up. But now we just stick them in old folks' homes and make sure they have the drugs they need. Of course, there are some people who never have children, and so this is really their only lot in life. When they get to a certain age and they can't care for themselves anymore, there is no one to take care of them, no one but the state. Short story author Alice Munro said, "The deep personal material of the latter half of your life is your children. You can write about your parents when they're gone, but your children are still going to be here, and you're going to want them to come and visit you in the nursing home." I often think about that when raising my own kids. If I don't put as much effort and work into my children as I possibly can, then they won't be in the state to be able to take care of me and my wife when it's our turn. I'm not saying children are for everyone, and I'm not even saying that this fate is necessarily always bad. I know there are a lot of nursing home workers who love the people they take care of, and that there are many communities that are not like this, that are actually healthy and comforting and beneficial. But I don't think it's a lie to say that most people don't want to end up like this, and would much rather prefer to be cared for by their children in the home where they raised those children than in a facility like this, where the highlight of the week is bingo night. As we enter the final room, it looks like a living space or a communal space, but we start to hear gunfire and the voices of synths. Running around the corner and racing down the stairs, we find that 4 synths have entered the convalescent home and opened fire on the robots. And when you arrive, Since the robot is the first person the synths see, they likely kill the robot almost before you even get there. It's hard to save the robot. What I did to save the robot is I loaded a previous save and then put a bunch of bottle cap mines just before the front desk. When I cleared the home and then came back around, they spawned right on top of the bottle cap mines, making them severely damaged and easier to kill when I got back. In this way, I was able to save the life of the front desk robot. If you play on a character that has sided with with the Institute, then the synths are not hostile and instead focus their attention on the robots. Once they kill the front desk robot, they patrol the rest of the home and destroy any other robots they see. They even kill the cat. So there's another reason to hate the Institute, folks. They kill cats. What could the Institute possibly be doing here? Why would they send a recon team to raid a convalescent home? Did they get wind that an ex-military soldier named Gladys was living here and might have a stash of grenades? Yeah, maybe, but I find that to be highly unlikely. Did they come for chems and medication? I mean, it is a convalescent home, so surely there was going to be medicine close at hand. And indeed, we do find tons of chems all over the place and in all of the safes. But I just don't see the Institute as having that much of a need for chems. They have their own doctor, they have their own food supplements. I suppose it's possible that they came for you. Maybe they got wind that you were going there and they wanted to finally take you out. But that doesn't explain why they show up, even if you play a character who's sided with the Institute. And it doesn't explain why they kill the cat. Why? Kill the cat. To me, it only makes sense that they are here because they want the surface dwellers to die out. As X688 says constantly, and the fastest way for the surface dwellers to die out is to kill them off personally. Just outside, you see a ship on the water off in the distance with the light on. If you swim over or use a jetpack to get on over, we actually find an homage to the movie Jaws. On deck, we find a dead body with a blue bandana, a camera, and a machete with a mutated dolphin gnawing on the body's leg. This Easter egg is a clear reference to one of the most famous scenes in Jaws. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the full story of the Sandy Coves Convalescent Home. An admittedly depressing place to have to visit. It just makes you sad for the people who lived here before the war. It makes you wonder if they would have been happy to know that this was how they were destined to die. The saddest part is that this is oftentimes an all too real way that many people end up. I often spend time thinking about what I can do to avoid a similar fate. Should I eat healthier? Should I be more active? Maybe I should do mental exercises. Or maybe I should just go on doing what I always do and just not think about it. If you'd like to chat about this nursing home with other like-minded individuals on the Oxhorn Discord server, be sure to click on the invitation link in the description of this video. And if you like what I do and you want to support me in a more personal way, consider becoming one of my patrons on Patreon. Patreon subscribers gain access to a private channel on my Discord server, as well as a bunch of other cool Oxhorn perks. But more than anything, ladies and gentlemen, I'm just so glad you're here watching this video today. Thanks for watching from the bottom of my heart, and I'll see you tomorrow morning, bright and early, with a brand new video.